save this, I go File, Save, come back into Google Chrome, and hit refresh. Hey, this is where the content of my page will go. Look at that. But look what else is going on. Now my header's kind of broke up. This little edge of my navigation bar has been pushed down a little bit. Everything's kind of looking funny now at this point. I mean, it looked good before. Well, maybe, let's see. This is my table data cell. This is the image inside of it. I don't actually need an image there. So maybe if I get rid of this. Maybe if I just delete that. Let's see what I get. Go back to here. I'm just going to go Control S to save it. So back into Chrome. Refresh. Well, that's close, but now, like, you know, some of the design has been cut off here. It's still not doing what I needed to do. Oh, and it's centered too. Why is it centered? What's going on here? The deal is you don't use a table. That's why this is looking so bad. It's because you don't want to use a table for your layout of your website. That's just like super bad design practice for web design. That's like the worst ever. Back in the day, back in like 2000, 2001, 2002, before CSS really became what it is today, and before you had XHTML, the only thing designers had were tables to lay out their pages. So this is the way it was done. It wasn't done exactly like this. I mean, I could go in and reslice this so that it would come out better, you know. A better way, if I absolutely had to use a table-based layout, would be to create individual image files separately out of my header, all my little navigation bar, my footer, create those individual files and lay out the table on my own and not let Photoshop do it for me. But you know, that's the problem with this table, is that my images here are not squares, you know, or rectangles rather. They're not perfect rectangles. They're shapes that have curves and points, and you know, they're not going to fit inside of a box. If they try to put them in a box, they're not going to fit. You're going to lose image parts, and that's what's going on with this. I'm losing image parts. So, without going into too much detail, you can see that this table-based layout is just not what we're looking for. It's just not it. It's not going to be it. So let's go back into Photoshop. I'm going to close this out. Let's go back into Photoshop, and let's look at outputting using CSS. So I'm going to go File, Save for Web and Devices. I'll hit Save. Now come back into my Settings dialog here. Go into Other. Get back over here. Keeps running away on me. We're still going to use XHTML, but I want to come down to, is it slices? Yes. My slice output. Rather than generate a table for my slice output, I'm going to generate CSS. And you say it says generates HTML, which uses cascading style sheets to represent slices. And those slices are referenced by ID. Specifies which types of CSS references to include in the HTML. I can use an ID, or I can use inline styles. Bad idea. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Or I can do it by class, which is also not so much of a good idea. You really want to use an ID. And when we get into CSS and Dreamweaver, I'll explain the differences between these three: the ID, the class, inline styles versus a style sheet. So we're just going to leave it at that. Hit OK, and then we're going to output again, and I'll change this name to index CSS, and then I'll hit save. It's going to ask me if I want to replace the images that are in the images folder, and I'm just going to say replace. No big deal. So now if I go back into Windows Explorer, now I have two HTML files, my table-based and my CSS-based. Now if you see this preview in Windows 7, you say, well, they don't look any different. They do look a little different, actually. Oh, they don't. Well, they do because I, changed this or whatever, but it's no big deal. So if I double-click it, it'll open in Google Chrome, and you say, well, that doesn't look any different than the other one. And you're right, it doesn't. Well, it does a little bit. the positioning's a little bit different. Notice there's a border or whatnot around the edge here. But don't mind the center content, because we changed that. Okay, so again, if I right-click anywhere, I'm going to get the Save Image As dialog box, because these are simply just images that are here. So I come over here to the side of my page, and I'm going to say View Page Source. Now, this is different. Now you're looking at, oh, here's a style tag, right? With a bunch of CSS styles applied to it. Wow, look at all these styles. All the way down to footer. And that closes my style tag. All this styling right here is done. So then I come into the actual body of my page, and here's my body tag, and now I don't have background or BG color equals £FFFF, which is white. I have the style attribute equal to a quoted value of background color, and then that background color value has the value of white. Alright, now I have now where I had a table before with a bunch of table rows and table data cells, I have a div tag. I have a div tag with more div tags inside of it. A div with an ID of index CSS-01 underscore. Then I have my image. And then I have my closing div tag for this div. And then I have another div tag for the home. Another div tag for this to be the content area. Another div tag for about. A div tag for forum. A div tag for training. Another div tag for contact. Another div tag for this other auto slice. And another div tag for the footer. And then the closing tag for the main div here. Now, Photoshop creates its own IDs. You see each one of these div tags has a unique individual ID, and none of them are the same. And I'm getting ahead of myself with that. Actually, this div tag and this image tag have the same ID, and that's bad. That's no good. You don't want that. Yeah, all these have the same ID, these divs and images. You don't want that. And I'll just do it now. Since they're bringing it up, I'll do it. The ID attribute is unique. Just like your driver's license, your identification, your ID card is unique to you. It applies only to you. No two people have the same ID. No two tags or no two elements inside of an HTML page should have the same ID. Because if I come up here to ID home, here's the home ID, you see it has positioning applied to it. Absolute positioning with a left and top position given, a width and a height given. Those attributes are going to apply to both this div tag as well as this image tag. So you really don't want that to happen. Now it's come out right, in here it looks right. It looks okay. It looks fine. But if you try to, make any changes to anything, it's not. So let's add content to this as well. Let's come in. Oh, we have to open it in Notepad. I'm going to close this, minimize this, my CSS, and edit with Notepad++. There we go. And let's come down. Should have a nice color coding. I love that green. It's awesome. And we'll put another P tag in here, and we'll say this is where the content is. Save it, Control S, back in Chrome, and refresh. Oh, and we get the same thing. Now in this case, we're getting the same thing. It looks the same as the table-based. What's going on with the div tags is these div tags are being used to essentially create a table, only not using a table. It works the same way. Using these div tags to create cells on the page where information will be placed. Now, I would have to go back in and reslice these, this image as a whole. See, there's the image. It's been selected. I have to reslice this image as a whole in order to, make this work correctly. Which is what we've already done. Technically, we've already done that. So I'm just going to close this out.